Bruce, can you explain to my mom, because I highly doubt she would be watching this, but you never know, what Facet Homes does or is?
Facit Homes is a home manufacturer. We manufacture homes using digital technology.
So, target customer right now, is it the homeowner or like a developer?
So there's two fronts to the business. There is Facit Homes, which has been servicing the consumer for, we've been selling and building homes to private clients. And there's Facit Technologies, which is our B2B front, which is servicing developers, housing associations, councils. And so they're two slightly different approaches to the same problem. Essentially, Facit Homes is and will always be the consumer face to the brand, whereas Facit.
Bruce, how do you deal with like skepticism? Because you know the consumer is a little bit like construction is a very low trust industry, and when you're trying to bring something new to the process, people are probably like, "Oh my god, this is like quite overwhelming."
It's certainly a lot easier now. I think at the beginning, when you're just getting going, there was so much skepticism. There's so much tire kicking. Oh, this is never going to work. But, like when we were now building houses, 29 and 30 big properties, we've been going for a while, and we've built up that trust over time. So, I kind of referred to that previously about building a brand. That's kind of what we've done. The brand builds the trust. And when people come to us, they believe what we say because we've got evidence.
I think this whole world of investment is new to me specifically. I came from big almost a year ago now, right? And so I've been on this somewhat of a startup school, talking to investors about what we're doing. And I think there's a few interesting things. First of all, you got your general VC. They seem to be interested in software. Like replicating Silicon Valley. So, those ones you really need to walk them down a path of construction. What is modular and factory-based? Why didn't that work? And why does this work? Then there's this other, group of AEC VCs that some are more educated than others. Some are still software only, and the opportunity is to really build stuff and and make stuff, but they're still got that traditional VC mentality.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode.
This episode is brought to you by Build Vision, transforming construction supply chain by bringing contractors, manufacturers, and stakeholders onto a single software platform. Visit buildvision.io to find out more.
Okay, Bruce, Ollie, Facet Homes, thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure to be on.
So I think we should just jump straight to the juice here. Bruce, can you explain to my mom, because I highly doubt she would be watching this, but you never know, what Facet Homes does or is?
Facit Homes is a home manufacturer. We manufacture homes using digital technology. So we do everything from design, construction, manufacturing, assembly, everything from the idea through to handing over the keys to the customer.
Okay, is it mostly for new builds?
Yeah, so we only do new build properties. We don't work on existing renovation, and we leverage technology across every step of the way to try and transform construction from a kind of chaos into a science.
Makes sense.
Is it a new approach, this mini macro factories, or Is it something that has been tried before and just didn't take off?
Yeah, so we've developed some very specific ways of working over the years. So my background is a industrial designer. I'm not an architect, but I've always worked in the architecture and construction sector. And we take technology that exists in the manufacturing industry and we apply it to the building of homes. So, for example, if you look at your phone, at no point has any human hand carved that out of a block of stone or anything else. It's gone from digital design to manufacturing to product and assembly and then into your hand. We take the same philosophy and approach. So how can we leverage digital design tools where you might have a computer model? How can we make that computer model real using machines that cut using computer information through to the final delivery? So we've got quite a unique perspective on the application of digital manufacturing, but also dealing with the realities of construction at the same time. So we kind of bring these two worlds together, if you like.
Maybe to add to that, I think the microfactory approach, I think Bruce and Facit are the pioneers of this approach. That, Bruce was doing this got started in 2007, and then you started to do on-site manufacturing like 2009, 2011. At the time, this was extremely counterintuitive to the notion at this time was build a factory and build loads of homes out of factory. And loads of people did build homes out of factories, which didn't work out so well. Today, there's more people exploring this microfactory. I mean, it's gone through a few iterations. On-site manufacturing, microfactory now is the kind of more trendy term. There's a few other people now trying to also do it. But actually, from my perspective, I think Bruce was the pioneer of on-site manufacturing.
Yeah, so if we just kind of rewind back to what we started in the beginning which was, right, we want to use digital design, and what's a good kind of flexible application of this? We chose CNC cutting or routing, which is a spinning cutter that moves and cuts flat sheet out. And then from that, we were like, okay, we've got a machine, that's great, but where are we going to build it? And we didn't have a factory, we didn't have any space. And actually, from an industrial design perspective, a bit like Toyota, what would a lean manufacturer do? They would reduce the time from manufacturing stuff to it being required, so just in time. And actually, we were like, well, has anybody ever seen if you could put a CNC machine in a container and bring it onto a construction site? Nobody had looked at it as an idea. And we went through it and we figured out all the electrics and electronics and rates and what we could fit. And it worked. And we were like, okay, this seems to work. So it means that, it's going to cost us a fraction of what it would cost us to put up a factory space. We've got no shipping. We're going to make components as we need it. It's all digitally controlled. So if it goes wrong, we'll just make a different component. So the philosophy of it was like, that seems like a good idea from my perspective. So let's give it a go. And we just did. We bought a machine, we got it on site, we made some houses. And then at the beginning, it was more like,
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
collaborative working with self-builders. And then very quickly, we broadened it out into being a contractor who did the whole thing and thought about the whole supply chain, everything, not just the CNC cutting in the middle of it. But it's a very practical, sensible solution, driven by economics. Whereas, I think that if I was Toyota, they leverage their factory space. They get every single penny and pounds value out of it because so much stuff is done by others. It's all just in time. And I think that the difference between homes and cars is that, you keep producing your cars. And if you've got too many cars, you put them in a car park. It's not a very expensive thing to do. You can't do that with homes. They're just fundamentally a different product. Out of the factory gate, your home comes, it has to go from the factory gate to your construction site. It's that dynamic that really changes the philosophy between making cars and homes. it's a bit more like, if you ever see have you ever seen a shipbuilding yard? Like when they make cruise liners, they actually have a huge yard and they build these huge sections of
Inside.
ship immediately adjacent to where the boat is going to be assembled. So they do chop it into modules, but they build it right next to it and then they crane it into place. So it's actually a very similar approach to what shipbuilders do when the logistics of the bits you've got to build are just too cumbersome to build too far away. So, from my perspective, it actually follows a real straightforward manufacturing logic and economic logic. Whereas a lot of people are like, why would you want to bring technology on site? But when you see it and you realize that the size of the footprint of the machine and the machinery on site is less than the size of one delivery of components, it's like, oh, okay. And you don't have any delivery of the components because you're just making it on demand. So it's incredibly simple. It's much more like a transformation of existing practice where, it's a simplicity to getting some materials, some tools, and some labor, and turning up on site and making some homes. And that's kind of what we do. So there's a kind of simple aspect to it, but we're doing it with technology and all the other stuff that we do.
Yeah. Bruce, I'm curious how you became convicted that that was the way to do it. Like, you must have thought about a few ways about how perhaps the building process, design and building process could be changed. And maybe there was some trial and error. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So really started actually back in 2003 when I was working at Norman Foster's Architects. We worked on a project in St. Moritz called Chiesa Futura, which is like a kind of wooden bubble on a hill in the ski resort St. Moritz as an apartment. And it was all digitally designed. It was made in conjunction with their advanced modeling group. And it was digitally manufactured, timber. And that was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I ran a small architecture practice for a while with some architects who I knew, but we got some funding from the GLA to say, which was in two parts. The first part was the Digital Craftsman Project is what it was called back in 2006, got some funding to research generally about use of technology for making homes. And then we got further funding, which was a proof of concept. So in 2007, we built a proof of concept, full-size mock-up using CNC cutting, which was identified in the first bit of research. And so, 2007, 2008, we built a few prototypes and proved it, like that it worked in principle before we bought any machinery or really got any customers. So off the back of that proof of concept, we're like, right, now we need to go and find some customers and build some actual homes and do it for real. So that kind of happened. 2010, we built our first 4 projects. And then kind of into 2012, we became more kind of design and build contractor and get really more ambitious with our approach. So moving beyond just CNC cutting of plywood components, but into supply chain, leveraging BIM models for manufacture, developing more products like aluminium and metalwork products as well, and just expanding off that. So the philosophy is much greater than just using a CNC machine to cut plywood. It's about a much bigger philosophical approach to thinking of the home as a single thing. So the beautiful thing about, you buy a car, it's really consistent. It's been thought of as a whole. It might have spark plugs by this company and wheels by that company, but the company who's made it have really considered how it's going to be designed, how it's going to be built, and how it's going to operate at the end of for the customer. And so it's that holistic approach that I think is a bit instilled in me as an industrial designer. Whereas the architecture, construction, engineering is literally that. Architecture, engineering, construction, they're like separate fields that don't really exist. And quite often in traditional construction processes, everybody's just looking after themselves. Architects just want to do their thing. The QS is just doing the costing. The contractor just wants to, build it. And everybody's kind of looking after themselves, but nobody's looking after the customer. Actually, a lot of what we do is like,
Engineers
what's going to give us the best possible results for our end customer, and that builds reputation and trust and product and all those things which we associate with good brands. Like, we trust the car brands and we trust the phone brands because we know they're going to perform and hopefully next year's model is going to be a bit better or a bit cheaper, or something along those lines.
Okay. On the product, is your product a bespoke home or a more scalable solution for housing? And it depends on what you say. How difficult it is to maybe switch from one to another, and maybe you can say something about scalability of the product.
Well, I'll
or
leave the scale aspect to Ollie, but the bespoke part is what we've created is a set of flexible design and manufacturing tools. So the flexibility built into digital manufacturing, so digital manufacturing being making stuff that are computer controlled, is that it's got a much higher degree of flexibility. So we can create any different shape, any different product with the same basic materials and digital inputs. So what we basically, each home has got the same bits, well, not bits, but same system. So there's a structural framing system, there's a heating system, there's a door system, there's a window system, there's a roofing system, and then we reconfigure it using digital design, and then we manufacture it using digital technology, and then it can be whatever the customer needs or whatever the site needs or whatever we want it to be. And part of what we always wanted to do is deliver better homes that are more ambitious than other people would be able to do, because we've got real confidence. So we literally take a digital model from our computer with every single tiny little detail, parapet detail, fall for drainage, all the kind of complexities that come with a more ambitious design. And we'll go and manufacture it to the millimeter exactly through our digital process with absolute confidence that what comes out of that machine will be what we went into it from the computer model in the first place. That allows us to be accurate, give cost, but also be bespoke. I wouldn't call it bespoke. I think bespoke is the wrong terminology. I would say it's just not standard. I think most modular processes end up with a standardized typology. So we've got a standardized set of parts, kit parts, systems, however you want to call it, that allows us to operate consistently, but the outcomes are radically different. So if you look at the homes that we've built over the last 16 years, they all look completely different, but they've all made the same stuff. So they can be big, tall, pitch roof, flat roof, funny shape, simple, whatever it needs to be, but you cut them in half and they all look the same inside.
I think, to add to that, I think that's one of our unique things, is that we approach the home as a product, but not a product like the way other modular companies, like stacking and copy and pasting the same typology over and over. We essentially have a parametric way of configuring all of these different parts into totally different shapes and sizes, which means we can adapt to odd size plots, right? Not every plot is perfectly square. We can create very bespoke or custom shapes of houses, and this does scale up. So, from building the single family homes that we do now, this same concept scales up to terraces, townhouses, and apartment blocks, which is what we're now looking to deliver.
So in that case,
on that point, I would say that there's a relationship between delivering flexibility and design tools and different product with what the market wants. Like, actually what we see is customers are much more ambitious in what they want to buy, and sites are more constrained, right? So we've got all these greyfield sites coming onto the market in the UK with the government pushing it. They're going to be complex, tricky urban infill sites. They're not standard cookie cutter stuff that you can build the same house over and over again. So there's a kind of two things happening. The customers wanting to be more ambitious and buy more differentiated homes, but also the sites that are coming into the market being denser, more complex, more challenging, that doesn't suit the super standardized home types that you might associate with someone like Barratt Homes.
So for the larger sites, let's say 40 houses, would each house be manufactured by using one microfactory, or this would be shared? Let's say two microfactories are able to manufacture one. How do you? What's your response to that?
I think so. Now we've developed microfactories at different scales, using the existing microfactories that we have plus the new ones. So depending on the size that you're building, our new microfactories can deliver 80 to 100 homes per microfactory. So if you have a development of 200 homes, again, it depends on the phasing, but they're modular in nature as well. So if we need two, we can bring two onto the site. If we need one, then we can just bring one. So I guess it depends completely on the size of project, but to answer your question, it's not like a 3D printer in that the machine is just outputting that one house and then it moves on to the other. It's a continuous production line of components.
So you said this number 80, I think, per year or per
year per microfactory.
Mm-hmm.
So target customer right now, is it the homeowner or like a developer?
So there's two fronts to the business. There is Facit Homes, which has been servicing the consumer for, we've been selling and building homes to private clients. And there's Facit Technologies, which is our B2B front, which is servicing developers, housing associations, councils. And so they're two slightly different approaches to the same problem. Essentially, Facit Homes is and will always be the consumer face to the brand, whereas Facit Technologies is the B2B.
Okay, fine. For typically, what does the process look like then? So someone engages Facit Homes. Do you then design it all in your office there, and then it's designed for manufacture, right? So maybe talk us through, like, is it like a 5-step, whatever it might be, 6-step, 7-step?
So it varies slightly. So sometimes we are appointed from day one, where blank sheet of paper, we're starting from scratch and going all the way through from that design, doing early stage costings, getting planning permission, and dealing with all the complexities of the site and build. But sometimes, we might come to us with an outline design. Sometimes there is a design that needs restyling or, value engineering or just modifying in some way. And occasionally designs come to us that are just good to go. We take them on and build them if they're appropriate for us and cost wise. So the bit at the beginning is a fairly traditional process in terms of, is a client, is a site, what does it need to be, establishing what the requirements are and going through design evaluation processes. The difference is we do it with a kit of parts that's kind of standardized way of working, so we can work very quickly through. So, I can go from day one with some very rudimentary building envelope calculations for the amount of slab, the amount of external wall, the amount of roof. I can price the building within about 1% because of the tools that we've got all back in. For the larger projects that we're working on, Ollie has kind of brought in a new set of tools into the business in terms of computational design. Maybe, Ollie, you could pick up on that.
Yeah, so I think as we scale up, the process is still the same. Sometimes a developer could have a design that already has planning. Sometimes they'll come to us with a blank bit of land and we'll design it from scratch. And now what we're doing is utilizing tools that we can to streamline this process as well. So, like, how can we not only streamline the construction process with on-site manufacturing and assembly, all this kind of stuff, but also how can we streamline the documentation that we need to do, populating the chassis and all this kind of stuff. So it's really streamlining that end-to-end process. We're just utilizing these tools that we can. That's all sorts of computational tools that you might find in architecture practice or that we've all been experimenting with.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to pick up on that for a second as well. So we're a multidisciplinary design office. So we've got production engineers, fabrication specialists, construction management, architects, dealing with both technical and early stage, and people from finance background as well, construction management. Everybody sitting side by side and working collaboratively. So we have no silos in the business. We're literally vertically integrated. and there's not that kind of handing over from one department to the other. There's a kind of fluid thing that happens between all departments. So our lead production engineer, Pedro, he'll get involved at stage, one design, looking at structural appraisals as well as looking at actual manufacturing issues and dealing with the fabrication on site. So we really try and get everybody in the business involved at all stages, which makes it quite an interesting place to work.
Mm-hmm. Can you guys tell us a little bit of your customer, B2B and B2C customers, why they would choose you rather than using traditional method of constructions?
Well, I'll take the consumer customers. I think for consumers and actually probably for developers as well, it's a bit of a minefield, to go out there and hire a separate architect, maybe hire a QS who might not know how to cost it that well, as sometimes is the case.
Usually don't know.
Have a level of uncertainty, to go out and find a contractor who you don't know. Being a general contractor is really hard, right? You get a bunch of drawings, your QS has priced it, suddenly you win the project. Oh God, we've got to build this thing. What's it made of? No idea. Oh, it's a steel frame. Oh, where are these windows from? It's a really challenging thing to do. So it's prone to conflict as well. Especially for private clients, they don't know what they're getting into, and they end up in real difficulties, struggling between these parties, not knowing what's going on. And I think from having run an architecture practice previous to this business, seeing that myself, I'm like, this is not great. It's not great for the customers. It's not a good customer experience, and it doesn't have to be. So, our principle was, well, let's just do it better. If we can give a better service to our customers, then we'll win more customers. So people come to us for certainty, for quality, really, those two things, and obviously the design aspect as well. But, being able to say with a level of certainty from day one, this is how much your building is going to cost, is really highly unusual, even though it's the top priority of every customer. Is how much is my building going to cost? What's my budget going to be? Is the number one question. So most people come to us for that, because we're able to say, this is what's going to happen. This is how long it's going to take. This is what's going to cost, and then we go and do it. What's not to like?
So, Ollie, before getting to you, so is it, Bruce, is it usually cheaper or more expensive to build?
We work out cheaper than a traditional contractor, broadly through the amount of time that it takes. So a traditional contractor building, a typical large property. So typically the consumer side, we build one-off homes between 300 and 400 square meters. We'll do that in about 11 months from breaking ground to handover. Traditional contractor is more like 18 to 20 months, I would say. So we'll do that in half the time, and the cost is reflected in that. And the variance on the cost is absolutely minimal.
Okay.
How about
Ollie?
just quick? Sorry, Bruce. Just one question.
Yeah.
Is the design process typically quicker as well?
Yeah, it's much quicker because there is a predetermined set of constraints that people buy into. Like, if people say, "Can I build the walls in concrete?" No, you can't. Can I use this different window system? No, you can't. There's already a bunch of stuff, decisions we don't have to make. So the decisions that we make with the customer are about design, access, the usual stuff, and the choice in finishes. So we tend to focus the customers are focused on, which exact tile set am I going to have? What's my kitchen going to be? So it's much quicker, because it's predetermined for quite a lot of the decisions.
Yeah, just one more on the consumer side of things. Sorry, Ollie.
Yeah.
No, I feel like you're ready to go. Bruce, how do you deal with skepticism? Because the consumer is a little bit like, construction is a very low trust industry, and when you're trying to bring something new to the process, people are probably like, "Oh my god, this is quite overwhelming."
It's certainly a lot easier now. I think at the beginning, when you're just getting going, there was so much skepticism. There's so much tire kicking. This is never going to work. But when we were now building houses, 29 and 30 big properties. We've been going for a while, and we've built up that trust over time. So I kind of referred to that previously about building a brand. That's kind of what we've done. The brand builds the trust. And when people come to us, they believe what we say because we've got evidence of it. So we very rarely have those kind of conversations about, this is not going to work. This is, what's it made of? This doesn't function, because, we've got enough houses to say, well, it definitely does because we've done it.
Ollie, over to you. B2B.
Just what? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I will stop you now.
I don't think the thing with the B2B side is it's not really that different. It's the exact same philosophy, just maybe scaled up. So like the parts that I was going to add, and I can add, is like, think of the traditional process of you hire an architect, they design you something. It could be a single family house or an apartment block, right? They design it. You maybe control them a little bit, but they're going to kind of design the most interesting thing possible. They have no idea how much it's going to cost. They'll have a little bit of an idea of how they're going to build it, a kind of somewhat educated guess, but it's still a guess. And usually what happens is, and we see this in both the consumer side and the B2B side, is I have a design, I now have planning, it's double or triple what I budgeted for. So I've already paid for it to go up to whatever stage 3 or 4. Have all this information. Now I've got to go out to a contractor. They're going to price it all up. It's way expensive. I have to go back to the start, redesign and rethink it. And this is where we save an incredible amount of time, in that we answer these questions at the concept stage, right? So literally from the beginning, we already know how it's going to be built. So therefore, we know really accurately how much it's going to cost. And to answer your question, why do consumers come to Facit? The same reason why developers come to Facit is because they've been through that process. They're looking for that certainty. I think maybe there's a bit more nuance on the industry at the moment, where we're finding developers, traditional construction is no longer really seen as unrisky. We have developers that come to us that have multiple projects where the main contractor's gone bust, and then you're left high and dry. At the other end of the spectrum, the world of modular and volumetric and fixed factory based has, it's a weekly basis. You see another giant company that spend 100 million quid on a factory go bust. And I can't name you one that is actually building homes at the moment, really. So traditional construction is like no longer really seen as risky. The modular and factory bases is almost non-existent. So there is a question of who is going to deliver all these homes. And I think developers are interesting in us, and this is where I think that the time of the microfactory and this kind of on-site manufacturing movement is kind of now.
My feeling on the why is it more risky is that there is obviously labor component, which is quite relevant. Aside to stuff like supply chains, labor is very difficult to grab and get the job done in the right way to the right quality. So maybe you can say something on the how are you de-risking projects using microfactories? Because I feel like that's one of the unique selling points to me, at least, when I think of what you guys do.
I mean, I think we're still automating a significant and maybe the most complicated part of the process, which is, the timber frame and the manufacturing component. There is still a labor component, but it's vastly reduced. And it also gives us an opportunity to utilize, it's not skilled labor as well that we need. It's fairly unskilled labor, putting together the parts into components and stuff like that. That's actually a huge opportunity to attract a completely new group of people to come and build, and actually have the people in the local community be part of building. And this is another thing developers have been interested in our process, is this idea that you can just automate out all labor is a fairy tale. Like, you're not going to automate out everything. So why not have it as an advantage where actually what we do need is, it's not necessarily super high skilled, and we can utilize and attract new people into more tech-powered construction jobs. And we see this on our current construction sites, right, Bruce, where we actually get a way more diverse group of people building on our building sites, which you don't see in traditional construction because it's not as heavy and dirty as concrete and bricks and all this kind of stuff. It's more refined. And I think also you see, a lot of these factory-based approaches, they're not, you still have an electrician, you still have a plumber doing all these things, but just inside, right? And, there's stories where we heard where, a factory is based here, the site is based in the town, and then the plumbers and electricians are coming 30 miles out to the factory for stuff to be shipped back to the site where they work like 5 minutes. They live like 5 minutes from the site. So I think there's this balance between the benefits of on-site and off-site. And, I definitely think we vastly reduced the amount of labor. This idea that you can just automate all of it is somewhat of a fairy tale.
I mean, just to kind of pick up on that same point. So what we do is we try and leverage the manufacturing process. So most traditional timber frames, pretty basic, right? They're stick, stud frame. There's not much to them. There's maybe some sheathing on the outside. And then you need to go through a separate process to build falls for drainage, parapet details. Your internal walls are built on another system. You've got second fix carpentry. You've got a lot of different things. Your staircase is another product. So we take all of these elements and then we pass it through the same manufacturing process, but we'll define in service channels, we'll define in all the complexities. So essentially, we'll do as much as we possibly can to define the quality of the project from the inside out. So if all of the follow-on trades have got to do is just stick their membrane on it or stick a piece of plasterboard on it, you've kind of de-risked a lot of that construction. But it's also not just the timber elements that we productize as well. So we've got cladding systems, we've got aluminium window pods, we've got staircase products. We do a lot of metalwork in-house. So we've got a kind of metalwork fabrication specialism. And as we go, we want to productize more because we're constantly asking ourselves, how can we solve this quality issue with a manufacturing process? So, for example, at the moment, we're redesigning all of our window interfaces because still our windows were like the holes in the buildings to receive the window is just a straight hole, right? And we would always find that the windows are slightly too far or too close set, which doesn't meet the requirements for the depth of the window pods on the outside or, all these things. So we're redefining the window interface so that they're just like put the window in, push it against a stop, fix it, and you're done. That the product defines the quality. So we also want to move on to bathroom pods and other products as we go so that we can continually try and increase the amount that we manufacture and decrease the amount of labor. But it doesn't have to be all done on site. So, for example, we work with a laser fabricator partner who does all of our cutting and folding. That gets supplied into projects. When we move into doing our bathroom pods, or it's probably more of a bathroom stage set than a pod, we will manufacture that offsite and ship it in because it's higher value stuff. Cladding panels, again, we're not going to be manufacturing cladding panels on site because, you're going to be constrained. But the bigger, dirtier, bulkier stuff absolutely makes sense to build on site. So we love factories. It's not like we don't believe in them, but we understand them in detail and understand where we can get value from them. But yeah, essentially, if you're going to stick a piece of plasterboard on it, there is zero value doing it in the factory because it's the same piece of plasterboard. You're just taking more time up with your factory space. So thinking about where you can add value. If we thought there was value in CNC cutting wallboards, we would do it. But arguably right now, there's probably not, right? So again, everything has to have a kind of case-by-case basis.
Do you guys rely on like external trades to do specialist things like the plumbing, electric, say?
Yeah, so we're a kind of hybrid approach. So we've got core team who we assemble ourselves. So we've got a team who will install the foundation system after we put the drainage in with the ground worker. So we've got a kind of kit system for the foundations. They'll do the chassis assembly, manufacture, put the windows in, do the doors. But then we have specialist contractors coming in to do external cladding, to do wiring, electrics, plumbing, heating systems, roofing. So it's a kind of mixture between our own kind of core team, who are doing quite a number of multi-trades with our processes and products, and fairly standard specialist subcontractors coming through.
Does this require some form of re-education for these trades, or is it quite intuitive?
It's very, very straightforward. People love us. Honestly, people like all of our subcontractors always come back to our projects because they're like, our Facit projects are so good because they're so consistent. We're not changing things. Like everything is just like contractors get so annoyed, and I'm sure you come across this because things change and I get this constant rework and things being out of place, and everybody just gets frustrated. When you come on a Facit project, it goes up, it gets built, everything's in the right place. The electrician runs his cables, puts it in. He's like, electricians love us, you know? And so it just gets done. So it's not, we try and redefine process more than product. So if you look at our buildings from a kind of very technical viewpoint, so breather membranes, ventilated cavities, and, you know, the substance is basically pretty standard. But the way that we get there and the process that we use are completely different.
Yeah, interesting. I suppose people don't really get. There's this concept called like project fatigue, where like a typical refurbishment. I suppose any project, like, you know, 2 or 3 months before the end, everyone's just sick to death. They're like, I just want to get off this thing because I don't know, maybe some reasons you mentioned, Bruce, like so many changes, the client's getting on their nerves and they're chasing each other around site or whatnot. Maybe, I don't know. Does that exist in Facit?
We've experienced it, definitely, and I think there's a cultural aspect that we try and change. You know, if you can, in just some of the things that we do. So, for example, even our site coordinators are architects, so there's a different culture on site and there's some different expectations. We've had multiple projects with female architect site coordinators looking after sites for us, and it completely changes the culture. I mean, honestly, all that kind of blokiness just disappears and people just behave better. It's fantastic. So definitely having female site coordinators has been really amazing. But
interesting.
If you can change the culture, like Ollie said, then we can attract new people into the sector. But you've got to change the culture. If it's going to be a kind of really dirty, untidy, unsafe site that's combative and people swearing at each other, then you're not going to get new generation who want to be there. So, you know, we're by no way near perfect. We've got a long way to go, but we do have a vision, which is the more that we can use technology, make it clean and safe and more, like I like watching, like you see videos on iPlayer of them doing Crossrail, right? They're like, you know, engineer trained, qualified people doing professional work with a real amazing attitude towards it, which is very different from the house building sector, which can be very low scale, very combative. But that very low skilled, very combative culture is disappearing, you know, because it's just those people are retiring, and the low skilled nature of it is different because you know there isn't people just hoiking stuff around for £80 a day anymore. Like all labor is expensive, no matter what it is.
Guys, so 5-7 years from now, are you a developer, builder, or are you selling micro factories to others?
It's the $1 million question, I guess. But no, I think we at the moment we're kind of exploring a couple models, but I think the primary one with Facit Technologies is how can we empower people to build using our technology. So we can offer a home building platform, a fully vertically integrated home building platform that enables people to tap into it depending on what they need. So let's say, Martin, you're developer A, you have a bit of on-site, you have a bit of construction experience, you've already developed the site and you already have a design. You come to us to use the building system. We take it through the technical design, manufacturing, lease out our machines so you can build the chassis, and then also utilize the products, the windows and doors that we use, and maybe we give you some help on site or not, depending on your appetite. And we enable you to build at lower costs and at faster speed. Another developer, Owen, developer B, might want to become a house builder with us, and together we do the entire process, and at the end of it you get a Facit development, and you can tap into our products, our supply chain, and everything. So we're really offering a platform that different customers can tap into depending on what they really need. And of course, this doesn't stop us from also being a house builder in that second scenario, and we just go and build some stuff. I think that's the unique thing with us right now, is that, there's other people in this space as well, but we can build to tomorrow. Like we have the product, we have the microfactories, and we don't need to develop that much more to be able to build this stuff today.
So in the case that someone would like to buy this technology from you and build themselves, what's can you share any costs of doing so, like based on this productivity of 80 houses per year?
So what we've created is, and has always been, is a very low capital cost, right? So if you look at the microfactory version that we use at the moment, it's an £80,000 capital cost. We hire finance that over 5 years. I literally pay £1,000 a month on my each machine at the moment, although one of them I own outright. It's negligible in the business.
Yeah.
So the capital cost is not significant, and it means that we don't have to have a really high utilization. So the business at the moment makes money through construction. The chassis manufacturer is super critical to the business, but it's not actually the key revenue generator. So it's, the actual machine capital cost isn't great in the scale of things. On the bigger scale, the new microfactory that's automated, it's £650,000 capital cost. Again, financed over 5 years, and you're building 100 homes a year. That's £30 million worth of construction per annum, So the capital cost is not a significant thing. And actually, we just treat it as a cost of doing business, a cost of the project, rather than a kind of setup infrastructure cost to the business. And so we don't need to raise separate capital for it. It's just based off the project work that we have. And, on that basis, the flexibility that gives you is immense. So I can go out and buy 2 of our current machines and get those to us in 3 weeks' time, right? 2 of them. That'll give us another capacity to do another 180 homes a year. So, that gives us the scalability where the factory model doesn't. The factory model is slow. You have to build your factory and you have to get planning permission for it, and then you have to fit it out and all these things. So the rhythm of it and the capital cost is completely different.
And as Facit, would you be making money on selling of these factories, or there will be some other subscription attached to it on
number of different revenue streams? So there is selling or leasing the machinery, operating it under contract, the material supply for those machines. So it's a bit like if you buy a printer, it's the ink. The beam supply, windows, are what we call our core products. So if it's just regular building materials, that can be through your general contractor, or it can be through your subcontractor, or whatever. But the things that are really associated with our products, we sell those to our customers or into our projects.
Okay. I did have a question, but it slipped my head. I was gonna probably just swing on to like how hard it is to build a company out of this, because we know there's
lots
a
of
few
moving parts as well.
Yeah, so there's a few companies we know that are doing similar micro local factories, and you probably know who they are as well. And they fall under this umbrella of like building hard things or hard deep tech, whatever you want to call it. How hard is it?
How hard is it? To do what we do?
Yeah, to have built Facit, because you guys have been going for what, 15 plus years now?
Yeah, been a while. I mean, we've built up our systems and processes over that time. This is one of the reasons that we're quite excited about our future, because we've spent so much time crafting and developing quite complex processes. So we've got Pedro, who's our lead engineer. He's built our entire back-end process. And honestly, we've rebuilt it like 5 times from scratch to be able to do what we do. And that's just one of about 6 or 7 primary different processes in the business, digital processes. Each of those has got a whole bunch of stuff that happens beneath the hood. So it's a challenging thing to do. And I think that what catches a lot of people out coming into the sector of house building is just how long it takes to design a product, develop it, make it, build it, see if it works or leaks or fails, both at the point of construction, but also 12, 14, 24 months beyond. That all takes time, and you can't really rush it. There's nothing you can do. You can't speed up time. You've literally got to do it. So it is a slow process to build these kind of companies and products, but we've already built our product because we've been refining it for such a long period of time. Actually, the innovation now is on the automation on the manufacturing, which is not really related to our actual building product, if you like. So it's certainly a challenge. I think where people struggle as well is you need a multidisciplinary team. I think that's really what I bring to the business as a whole. Is I've got a weird background as an industrial designer working in architecture and have very specific digital tools that I picked up along the way, or a kind of digital viewpoint that has enabled us to build a multidisciplinary studio to make it happen. Whereas what you see is quite often, I don't know, companies coming into it, but not necessarily understanding that collaborative working or misinterpreting the sector. I think so. Someone like Legal & General, I think, is a very good example of an idea that was created by people with a lot of money, but not a lot of nuance and understanding of really what happens in housing. It was a very simplistic idea. Unfortunately, what we do, it isn't sexy. It's complex and gritty and granular, and it's not big factory, machines, houses, bang, 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 done, money in the bank. It's much more complex than that. And I think that when you see people with very simplistic ideas claiming that they're going to dominate the world, I mean, when Legal & General first started out, I was like, right, it's 50,000 square foot, that factory. Sorry, 500,000 square foot. 500,000 square foot factory, right? And you're going to produce 3,000 homes per annum, right? And you do the maths and you say, well, if I wanted to do 50,000 homes per annum, right, which might make a dent in the whole house building sector, I need 9 million square foot of factory space. 9 million. I'm like, that's going to take 20 years to build. You're never going to. And actually, what happened is, how many houses they produced per annum? 200 tops. Like that's let's do the maths on that. It's like a squillion square foot of factory space you need.
Hey, what's the Russian one? The recent Russian one that they find Google?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Centillion or something.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
quintillion.
Yeah, that's how many square foot you need.
Yeah, I think maybe to add to that, I think it's been Bruce has worked incredibly hard to get Facit to where we are today. And I think Bruce, I keep saying, I think he's maybe a victim of being slightly ahead of his time as well. I mean, we were doing this. Bruce was doing this microfactory stuff, before, whilst everyone was pouring money into factories, right? And there have been a lot of people that have tried to replicate the kind of Facit system, and I think we've also spent a lot of time looking into this factory base. Why has factory not worked? Like, there's whole first principles of why it doesn't work, which Bruce just explained. Like the square footage that you need to build homes is just insane. But also things like promising the world, like, I'm going to build this factory and we're going to build 10,000 homes a year or 50,000 homes a year or whatever it is. And there's now micro factory companies saying they're going to build 100,000 homes a year. And it's just, I think there's certain lessons that we can learn from, the failure of modular and factory based that we can apply as we go into this microfactory era. But yeah, it's definitely not easy, and we also find challenges where we're, whether it's investors or developers, there's still this, some have been burnt in the factory world, right, and lost a ton of money, and so we're like, oh, now it's a microfactory, and it's like, sounds a lot like the same thing, but it's a completely different proposal process, and financial. Proposal.
Interestingly, we've grown with not a single penny of investment. We've managed to do this entirely off our own back. And that was part of the philosophy is day one. We need this to be commercially successful without a debt model. So we need to be able to just set up, do one house and do that commercially within our own means, which is what we've always done. Whereas a lot of models are based on, finance and debt, which it's just entirely opposite.
How do you kill investors' objections or prejudice? Prejudice is the word.
Maybe.
Again.
Yeah, prejudice. And, I think this whole world of investment is new to me specifically. I came from big almost a year ago now, right? And so I've been on this little somewhat of a startup school, talking to investors about what we're doing. And I think there's a few interesting things. First of all, you got your general VC. They seem to be interested in software, like replicating Silicon Valley. So, those ones you really need to walk them down a path of construction. What is modular and factory based? Why didn't that work? And why does this work? Then there's this other, group of AEC VCs that some are more educated than others. Some are still software only. And the opportunity is to really build stuff and and make stuff, but they're still got that traditional VC mentality. I've had Patrick from Fundamental on the podcast, as you guys have as well, and he seems to really understand the nuances of it. And in some VC cases, you kind of, in the AEC space, you break a lot of the rules that general VC for other general stuff would never do. And that's when you get into that kind of, there is a sprinkle of hardware, but you know what, it's incredibly low cost, and it's not really, there's a ton of other stuff that we're building around it. So I think when you get to the core principles of it, like we have a quite powerful side where you actually see the cost of a factory versus our micro factory on a per house basis. So you actually understand your factory per house costs you about 120 grand in overheads and stuff just to get the factory. That's not even to run it. Whereas ours costs about £2,400 a house.
Yeah.
And that's not 10x. That's 100x plus improvement on what the current the new norm is.
I think just going on to the VC, I think so many VCs are focused on software, and our perspective is it's not going to change anything in the sector. Like the problems that we have in housing and construction, you can't solve with software. They're far more complex. Software is going to help, and it's part of our solution. We use all sorts of different software, and we make programs, and we do all sorts of stuff. But at the end of the day, you're building real physical stuff with real human beings on site. Software on its own is not going to cut it.
Physical solutions for physical problems.
Yeah, exactly.
We simply need to build shit and not just build it in the computer.
Very good. Would you guys maybe this is kind of a funding, something that funding might enable you to do, but would you expand outside of the UK?
Oh yeah, definitely, and that's part of the pitch at the moment as well. And we're talking to US investors and also other European investors as well. I mean, the opportunities are for what we're working on way beyond the UK. So yeah, we're definitely interested in going beyond borders, and actually the US market in particular. The way that we build materials that we use are very well suited to the US market. The US particularly suffers because it's so big as a territory or multiple territories. Just the distances are huge. And so modular really only works in a very small amount of instances in the US because the traveling distances are just so huge. Whereas we can obviously bring our machinery to
That's a really interesting point. If you think about the US, like literally our microfactories are in containers. So they could not be more shippable if you tried. But you think about the US, right? Think about building factories to build homes in the US, right? So if you want to build all over the US, you at least need factories in each state. Each state is maybe, at least the size of the UK, if not bigger. And so you kind of need multiple factories in each state. And each factory is going to cost you millions, months of time to build. So this approach where you can just ship the factory wherever you need it is even more powerful in places like the US.
I mean, I think, just coming back to the bigger point about factory is there will be instances, and there are instances, of factory fabrication being successful for homes. But if you look at what proportion of the market it makes up, it's at the moment about 4% of the market. 96% of homes are built on site one way or another. And let's say modular homes in one way is really going to take off. It'll take 5-10 years. Tops, it might be 10% of the market. You've still got, 85% of the market left to deal with. That's the opportunity. And actually, that's where you can transform change more quickly. So for me, the construction site is like an unexplored territory. Nobody's ever taken technology there. Nobody's ever really tried to apply some more interesting tools and ways of working. I think you see it slightly more on the more advanced construction sites and, more large infrastructure projects that are incredibly technically challenging, or building skyscrapers or whatever. But housing is really, it's like a desert. Nobody's ever tried to do anything there. So it's a very exciting opportunity to try things out. That's what I like, trying things out, new ways of working.
Because it's hard and people don't want to spend how many, you were 2007, Bruce?
Yeah.
17 years, trying to come up with the solution perhaps. So
yeah.
What would that take when you guys are thinking about going abroad? What would that take to adjust that tangible way of building things in the UK, from the UK to, for example, US or somewhere in Germany or anywhere else in Europe? Because I guess that would the product be still the same, or would you have to adjust to regulations?
If you think about what we do, it is much more of a philosophy than it is an actual fixed product. So, for example, we define new products all the time within the business, depending on what the requirements are. So if there's a different structural strategy, a different fabrication strategy, then we just change our product, but it doesn't have very much costs for us. So, for example, at the moment, we use mostly closed panel building components that are injected with insulation. For the higher rise stuff, we need to go to a non-combustible insulation that is installed from the outside. So we've just developed a kind of semi-open panel version of what we do. And the expectation is that when we go to different territories, we're going to have to modify for the local building code, but the fundamentals are the same. You've got structural graded timber, which is universally understood, and you've got a machine that cuts it, which is not actually part of the thing. So, we can adapt to whatever the building situation is within the realms of a building that you would build in timber. I would say, if it's not a building that you would build in timber, then we're not going to be looking at it. But other than that, we're able to go and adapt to whichever building code is required.
Okay. So is your technology considered as like MMC, or is it considered traditional timber structures? And how structural warranties are looking at it in the UK?
I would say we're definitely MMC. So it's a modern method of construction where we're building using technology and modern processes. Fundamentally, it's still a timber frame, which I think, as Bruce said, is like that's actually our advantage. We can bring it to the US and Europe, where timber frame is already prevalent. Like, look at 3D printing. They still have a ton of hurdles to expand beyond where they're doing things right now. Climate, as in, look at Icon, they're building in Texas and stuff, but that would be really hard to build in the UK where it's wet and cold all the time. Whereas timber frame is prevalent all over the place. As for the warranties, I'll let Bruce talk about that one.
Warranties wise, we get warranties on our buildings. We have to. We've got customers with mortgages. It's part and parcel of what we do. So again, when you're working philosophically, which is don't do anything that's fundamentally changing building science, right? Work within the established ways of working, and then you can get warranties and you can get whatever you need. Being site intensive as well gives us an advantage because you don't have to go through BOPAS, you don't have to do off-site kind of certification, because essentially you're still building it in a fairly traditional manner. So the warranty side for us is pretty straightforward compared to the likes of people who are doing it a long way away from site.
Who created this term, modern methods of construction? At what
Well, I
point does a
don't know.
method stop becoming modern?
There's so
That's a
many
good question.
terms that are not very useful, like modular, prefab, volumetric, MMC.
Everything but cavity walls.
Yeah, and that's why we like to talk about. It's very nerdy and not very well understood, but we like to talk about digital fabrication because digital fabrication is an extremely powerful set of tools, and that covers anything from laser cutting, CNC cutting, wire bending. It's like there are about 100 different digital manufacturing processes that are out there. All of them are leveraged usually in the construction industry through facades and stuff like that you wouldn't necessarily see. But it's a not a very well used term. So in the construction industry, you see a lot of people doing modular, using very standard ways of working, using standard bits of tools, but they're doing it in a factory. It's not digital manufacturing, So that's why we try not to use the standard terms too much, because they're not particularly useful, like MFC or even offsite or on-site, because actually we do a lot of fabrication off-site, but we do a lot of stuff on-site as well. So, again, the terms are much more nuanced, digital fabrication as opposed to anything else.
What?
You mentioned, Bruce, I probably have 2 more questions I want to go over, but you mentioned that Facit is like a philosophy, which is a great way to put it, actually. Do you think that this has the potential to replace the traditional process in its entirety? I guess it's quite a big question and will take some time, but it sounds like the benefits are probably perhaps a little bit too good to ignore.
I mean, I don't see it. The thing is, I do see it as a very traditional process. I just see it as a natural evolution of it rather than replacing it, because ultimately at the moment you're doing way too much stuff using human labor. You want to transform that, and the only way you're going to do that is with more productization, more assembly. There are always going to be limits to that. I think it's a very long way away before you can really automate everything. I think the costs of things are so high. I mean, we did a whole evaluation piece last year actually on robotic assembly. It's still an extremely expensive thing to do, and it's still the amount of programming that it requires and stuff. Just we put it to bed because it was like, there's no way we're going to do this until a good 3 or 4 years down the line, and then we might pick it up, and then it's going to be too soon. But I see it as an evolution of the construction process. I think the biggest change is actually cultural, that actually people who want to work on building sites are few and far between. We have to change that culture. So I think that's almost the bigger challenge, really. And you've got to create the tools that people want to use. If we can make jobs that feel really modern and exciting and digital, then that you'll get that natural transformation of the construction site, which is, I don't know what the alternative is, because if nobody wants to be on a construction site and all the brickies are retired and nobody wants to do plasterboarding anymore, what do you do?
You use Facit homes.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask, from your current way of building things on site, what is that you are trying to improve right now, or make it better, or
And why?
So it's good.
I guess, the challenge that we're doing right now is scaling this up. And so I think it's like improving, for example, the machine itself, like the CNC machine in a container. We now have a new one we've developed with Facit, where we've added all this automation around it. So it's about, that is the engine, right? That can literally allow us to cut more sheets, automate the cutting sheets, and just, you can leave the thing overnight. It's just going to be cutting away. Then the next stage is inside the microfactory, right? How can we also improve the assembly? You know, can we use augmented reality to improve that process? Now we can, you know, for the single family homes, we build the components one by one. But now we can join the components, and we can actually put the windows in and then create it in place, so we can speed up the assembly. And so I think right now it's improving all these things that we've already established, but just making them streamlined. And again, like where I've been kind of coming into is the design process. How can we go from a concept model into like a detailed model in Revit extremely quickly? So again, so I think it's really about scaling up and improving the things that we already do. And as Bruce mentioned, there are new products and things we're developing, like facades and bathroom pods and all this kind of stuff, which, you know, we've experimented with in the past, but now we're like, okay, how can we turn this into a product? So
but I think it's, you know, just going back to that augmented aspect, I think that's for us is the next natural step is augmenting the construction process, where you can leverage the digital information. So a very good example of that is in the new machine that we've developed with Facit. It has a printing system. It's 2D printing. It prints 2D information onto the surface of the parts, which then become 2D information on the surface of the components. That 2D information contains setting out points, socket locations, tile setting, toilets details, whatever information you want to put that broadly already exists in the design information is now manifested onto the construction product to de-risk it. So it's a kind of gamification of the construction process where you can use these digital tools to make the construction process more simple, make it automated, almost make it a bit fun. You know, I think there's definitely something that we do which is Lego-like, you know. There's like you think about Lego, there's a challenge in the assembly and there's a joy in it. You didn't design it yourself, but there's a satisfaction in the stuff going together. And oh look, there's a location mark here, and I put this there and there. There's something joyful about that process. So I think we can use that. So that the 2D printing system is going to be extremely powerful in helping that process. Both making it more pleasurable as a contractor or as an assembler maybe, but also adds value because you de-risk the project. If I can see that every single thing is in the right place because of the mark on it that I know is in the right place, then I don't have the rework. You know, reworking and defects is an absolute killer.
Question: Is the philosophy similar to ICF, insulated concrete formwork? Slightly
Yeah, a little bit. You know, there's some similarities there. The only thing with the ICF is it is a bit more of a kit of parts where you're literally, you know, you've got a kit which is maybe 10 to 15 different core bits, and then you chop them up to assemble them. The thing about ours is the bits are fundamentally different because they come off the machine, which is made at a different size. So like unlike an ICF system, it's like, it's this wide and that's what you're getting.
Yes.
We can make that component any width we want for any different project at any given time. So there's a similarity in its approach, but the elements we manufacture are much more flexible.
The reason I ask is that I very often recently get builders, even developers, asking to redesign things from traditional to insulated concrete formwork. And the reason they say the argument that is that it's so easy and so nice to do it.
There's a similarity in terms of the construction process for sure. Yeah, so occasionally we work with an ICF company to do basements. And it's, you know, it's a similar thing, right? It's like stack it up. It's nice. It's nice to work with. So we use the foundation system we use, which is by a company called AFT, Advanced Foundation Technologies. It's basically a ICF formwork system for foundations, and we can do it with the carpentry team. You know, so it doesn't need to be a ground worker. I mean, ground workers, some of them are great and some of them are terrible. So I'd rather do more with carpenters and less with ground workers if I can.
Okay, my last one would be on the limitations and some sort of restrictions in terms of maybe spans or the height of the building. What do you say to those?
So the span-wise, we don't have any restrictions. So if we need to use structural steelwork, we can and we do. You know, we're building a project at the moment up in Suffolk. It's got some very big spans. It's got some quite big bits of steelwork. it just integrates into what we do. We quite like working with steelwork because it's a similar thing. You know, you're working with fabrication companies who are used to working to very fine precision on the steelwork fabrication. So it's part and parcel of what we do. And again, it's just more economics, you know, like if all the spans in your building are going to be really big, it's going to cost you more money. It's going to cost the customer more money. So we generally stick to reasonable spans. We'll try and keep everything structurally aligned to make it less, you know, complex, but it's more economic than it is actual restrictions with how we operate.
Okay. And in terms of the height, like how many stories can you build of that?
In theory, we could go as big as we want. In practice, because the fire restrictions are the things that determine it. So at the moment, we'd be lucky to get 5, I think, in the UK. Other countries, rules are completely different. In the US, you can build much bigger buildings out in the frame.
Very good. My last one would really be where guys could find out more about you. I know you have a very good content library, should I say, for the Facit homes, which are very helpful for us preparing for this discussion. So thank you. If you guys could tell us, especially Ollie, in fact, I know you do the Architect Network as well.
Do you mean our new YouTube channel? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I was hoping you wouldn't promote that because you actually have more subscribers than us. So,
So, well, I mean, you know, I guess Facit, you can find out about how we build at Facit Homes, and also our new YouTube channel. We've started to share a bit of information like how we build and just kind of educate people on you know, our methodology, our philosophy. Obviously, the new side of the business, Facit Technologies, at facittechnologies.com. I think Bruce and I are also like really active on LinkedIn. I think we talk to a lot of people. Bruce is definitely an industry voice in this, let's call MMC space, or, you know, whatever acronym we want to use. So yeah, I think definitely reach out to us on LinkedIn. That's kind of a good place to connect with us, and, you know, check us out on Facit Homes and Facit Technologies.
Okay, guys. Thank you
good.
very much.
Thank you, guys.
No problem. Thanks for having us. It's been great.
Thank you.